Ready?
Oh, ready.
Hey, might as well. It's 7 after.
Yeah, no problem.
Get these good folks home at a reasonable hour.
All right, great. So I wanted to take just 10 minutes if I could. So thank you for the opportunity because I know you've got a lot of work ahead of you. I wanted to do a quick thank you to date for the work that you have done. And I know that you're starting to get into the meat and potatoes now. And the public information meeting, I think, was very good, as well as a number of the different comments that have come in. But my nature is that I get very defensive of family and extended family, and our staff is my extended family. And so I wanted to play two short clips that I had heard and I'd isolated, or had our folks at PCTV isolate. And I just want to share a couple of my thoughts around that. And Doug is going to just tee those up. It's about a minute long or thereabouts, and I just ask that you play it. And then from there, I just want to make a couple of comments. First one's going to be from Bob Reed. The second one is from Jeff Burns.
Jeff, we have that queued up?
It's all 90 seconds.
These are from the meeting.
This is from the public meeting.
Just because nobody's saying that doesn't mean that there aren't voices in this town and this area that aren't thinking that, or thinking of some kind of commercial development there. And some of those voices, developers and builders, have a lot of traction. They have powerful voices. So just because the overwhelming sentiment here is that we want to keep it green, or maybe some development around the edges in terms of recreation, doesn't mean that the committee and the town are going to implement that idea. People need to stay involved in monitoring it. I've been involved in a number of meetings like this where public opinion is earnestly requested and then eventually totally disregarded. So the challenge is to stay involved and remember, we're not the only voices in the town, and there may be other viewpoints.
But I believe that it's time that we accommodate nature and allow a large area to remain mostly or entirely in a natural state. And I do like the idea of what's been mentioned before of using a brush cutter to keep trees down and things. A couple of recommendations I'd like to make to the citizens group. One is to please balance the input you receive from our town planners with outside stakeholders like you're doing tonight, and experts on open space, natural preservation, and low impact recreation.
So I asked to have those two isolated because there were some innuendos there from my perspective, and obviously different people will listen to those and maybe draw their own conclusions. But my sensitivity is that we've got a staff here that is second to none in this county and in this region. These are individuals that are all professionals in their own right. The thought of them trying to steer this committee, really caused me a little bit of gas. And I just wanted to come and to say, the group that you have here, they're here for one purpose, and that is to support you. They come in, they give their best each and every day. We have longevity like you wouldn't believe across this community and across this county. Our folks are headhunted on a regular basis. They elect to stay in Penfield. And the reason they elect to stay in Penfield, I believe, is because they like this community, they enjoy this community. We try to keep what I would call all the outside political influences out of this community, to give them the day-to-day operations and to make this community the best it can. And I just get very energized, as you can tell, around that. When somebody starts saying something about my family or my extended family, our town staff, I want you to know that they're here to support you. There are no ulterior motives coming into this. We acquired the property. At no time has the town board or myself said that we're looking to do anything commercial on that, like it was kind of hinted around by Mr. Reed. Some comments that he makes, there are no facts to support that, but just kind of leaves a question in everybody's mind. And with Jeff Burns, the concern that I had with Jeff is to, saying make sure that you balance what you hear and not just take the information that you're getting from staff. Hopefully what staff is providing is answers to your questions, any materials that you want, that you need as you're going through this very important review and making recommendations back. So I just felt the need to come and spend a couple minutes just to share that out of a little bit of frustration on my part. And I also wanted to say a couple of things that I've heard, and a couple of committee members have spoken with me about this, and that is that, is the timeline too aggressive? And what I'll say to you is that when I met with you when we first kicked off, I wanted to indicate that this was the timeline. If you don't have a timeline, things can just continue on forever. I will say that if this committee believes that more time is needed, necessary to produce the best product back to the town board, we certainly will give you that time. I don't expect that that's going to be a year or 2 or 3 from now, but certainly a reasonable amount of time to be able to prepare the best recommendations back overall. And I'll just repeat, our board has absolutely had no conversations, have no interest in looking to go out and get a developer to build residential, to build commercial, to build industrial, or anything like that. This is land that's owned by the town, will be owned for generations to come in this community. We have an opportunity to set up this property for the best use or uses for all of our community. And again, that's the reason that you were selected to come in and help us with that and make those recommendations. So I'll take any questions anybody has, but I know you've got a lot of important work, and I just wanted to make sure that recognize our team, our staff, who does so much for this community each and every day. Bob?
It's just that I didn't hear that anything like that from Jeff Burns demeaning the staff in any way. I didn't get that.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
I didn't hear that. I can see what Bob Reed said was offensive, and, but I didn't get that from Jeff. So.
Okay, that's fine. All right.
Thanks, Tony.
Absolutely, thank you. And thanks again for all the work that you do. I appreciate it. Thanks, Amy. Thank you. Thanks.
All right. Why don't we jump in? Got a lot to talk about tonight. We've got, just to quickly go over the agenda, updates from the staff. Let's just read through the agenda first. Updates from the staff, then a review of the public comments that were submitted. We had them via email, the public informational meeting, and then the website. And we're going to go through all that stuff as far as we can tonight. And then finally we'll discuss the meeting dates if everybody's okay with the meetings, and if you're not, then we'll start to look at changing them around to accommodate your needs, okay? With that, why don't we get started with the staff's updates. Before we get into Chris, I'm sure we have a lot of things to talk about. Do you have anything that you want to talk about? Are you in good shape?
Yeah, I'm in good shape. I have the email I sent everyone this evening with the public comments. I have handouts of those, but I was going to let Chris do his part first, and then we'll jump into that after. So take things one step at a time.
Thanks, Ed.
All right. Jump in, Chris.
All right. Well, I'll try to stretch this out since Jim said I have a lot to say.
You better have a lot to say.
So I just wanted to give an update as to that survey that was completed back in November for the rec master plan, just to give some idea of where the community thoughts were in regards to not only rec programs but also how it kind of spills over into other areas. Obviously Shadow Pines was part of the feedback that we received. So I've gone through most of the results. I haven't sifted through all of it yet and broke down all of the data yet. But what I did was I basically wanted to give you an idea of some of the questions, some of the key pieces that I thought, again, would be useful for this group. And then I did pull out, as a step, we went through and pulled out all of the comments that had any direct relation to Shadow Pines. I'll give you a hard copy of this tonight. I just told Zach tonight. I'll email this to him Thursday. And then he can upload that, so you guys can have this as well.
I can actually make copies for everybody too.
I got
if you
that.
want. Oh, you do it for everybody?
I think I made 20, I guess.
We'll find out.
So there's those. There were basically, there were 2 questions in the survey that allowed, well, there was 3, but really only 2, where we received feedback where people could actually input their information, that we pulled out anything, again, that was related to Shadow Pines. Some of them will have other information tied to their response, because they may have had multiple things to say, so you'll see as you kind of go through that. The first one that's actually listed on there was a question that was based around what recreational activities, both indoor and outdoor, do you expect Penfield Recreation to provide you and your family? And again, those are the responses that we got. The second one, which was the last question, which is sort of that generic question, so to speak, please add any additional comments. That's obviously where we got the bulk of the feedback.
Wow.
So you guys can read this on your own, but I'll give you some of the data that we were able to pull out of that survey, again, that I think would probably relate back to this group a little bit in regards to some of the numbers. So, to get you started, there were 650 surveys that were completed. It was a combination of both online as well as hard copy. So we had, obviously, a bulk were done online through SurveyMonkey, but if people submitted hard copies or they turned them in hard copy, then we just went in and batched and put that information in. So that gives you some semblance of the number of responses. The survey was only open for about 2 weeks. Just over, actually. So we tried to keep it on a very short window versus keeping it a longer space where we'd lose interest. And I didn't put some of these numbers in, but obviously those first 2 or 3 days is when we got close to 3/4 of the percentage of completions were done. So keeping it on a shorter time span was what that master plan committee really wanted to do this go around. That's why it was on a shorter span. Some of the feedback that we got from some of the other questions that were based on, and again, fill in the blank, so to speak. Out of that 650 people that completed it, we had 93% of the respondents said that they were aware of what we do as a department from a program standpoint, which is significant for us. 91% of that number actually participate. So we felt we're getting data, at least from people who are familiar with what the town provides from a rec standpoint. Been a little bit more concerned if that number was lower, but the fact that we were at 91% of those folks were actually participating in programs. One of the other questions that was on there is we asked them to rank the programs that they like to participate in, and I think there was 35 different activities that we had listed out, and it was everything from hiking to exercise classes to painting to performing arts to music, etc. Tried to capture basically everything that we could from a rec side. Some of the numbers that came out, 38% of the people that submitted, their interest was in hiking. And again, I pulled out the numbers that I would say would relate or pertain directly to Shadow Pines. So 38% of the people had an interest in hiking, 25% showed an interest in nature or nature walking, 20% an interest in biking, and then 19% had an interest in jogging and walking. Those were not the top end of our spectrum. Those tended to be in more of a generic category of health and wellness. A lot of educational classes were at the top end of their interest. But those were, I'll say, on the higher end. We had a number of activities that were much lower than that. So obviously, I'll say the outdoors active type of participants are looking for something that a Shadow Pines piece of property would accommodate. One of the questions that was in there, we did talk, because I know that is one of the things that is, has some potential at that property if the committee feels and the town feels so, is athletic field space. And we heard a little bit about it at the Shadow Pines at the input session. There is a question in the survey that does talk about, does the community center meet your need, athletic fields meet your needs, parks meet your needs, trails meet your needs. And 46% of the people that responded felt that athletic fields does not meet their needs. So I know there's been some questions in regards to where people's, perception in regards to do we have enough fields or athletic space. That wasn't broken down by baseball or soccer, or et cetera. It was just listed as athletic fields. And then the last one that I did pull out was in regards to the number of parks and the frequency in which residents or the participants are visiting. Rothfuss Park, not surprisingly, was our #1 most visited park with an average attendance of 15 times per year for those that submitted. So gives you some sort of semblance as to how many people and what their frequency of using the park. Veterans Memorial was right behind it at 11, and Harris Whalen Park after that at 9, which is what we would consider probably on par from what we do using the fields and using the different amenities at the
15
parks.
times a year was the average?
That was the average.
Over 650
That's
respondents?
correct. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. The only thing, Bob, I couldn't tell you is, but I don't think it'd be a significant number to that, is the data does tell us how many of those questions were skipped by the people as they completed it. But as I was going through it, most of them were answered. There was a few that, people, just skipped over it, didn't have to answer, because there was no penalty for not answering a question. You could skip it. The feedback that's on there is listed again in the 2 questions, and then I also did list at the very end, we had our rec master plan input session on the 29th of November. So there were a number of people, it wasn't as well attended as this one. However, we did have people that came in that did have some input and some suggestions strictly on Shadow Pines. So we tried to capture that separately, so it just didn't get rolled up. So what we did is, the way our input session was, rather than be formal where people went up and spoke like it was here, ours was used as an input where people could actually interface with the 4 pieces of our master plan. So instead of signing up to speak or going up in front, you were able to actually ask questions with the subcommittee and the subcommittee members to be able to kind of find out what are some thoughts, what are plans, what's some of the direction, if there's questions on usage. So people were able to talk to the parks group, people were able to talk to the programs, the facility, and the people, those 4 stations. So each one of those subcommittees were able to gather anything that was directly related back to Shadow Pines, and that's what's listed last on that sheet. So that's it. We don't plan to meet again as a subcommittee or as a committee for the rec master plan. I gave them the holidays off, so we're not going to meet again until after January. The plan is right now that the master plan, we will not have another input session. The plan is that each one of those subcommittees may look and reach out to the community for one focus group that relates directly to their tasks. So again, programs, people, facilities, or parks. So we may do a focus group for those pieces, but we do not plan at this time to do another input session.
And when is the plan done?
Our hope is that we're going to be in that same, I'm going to call it,
March.
Spring,
Yeah.
as long as the weather cooperates, March, April timeframe.
So what are the largest gaps that we have as a community in terms of that survey?
Gaps in program or gaps in participants or both, or?
Facilities, yeah, I mean, so that's related to programming, so if there's...
Correct. What we see from a programming standpoint, it ties obviously directly back to the facility, and we've had this conversation internally as a department, and I've had it with Tony several times. What we've done, and I can bring it to a future meeting, Jim actually got to sit through my presentation with the board. What we've done as a department in regards to the number of programs that we provide out of that facility is truly maxed out. I can't generate the number off the top of my head, but the number of participants that go through that we track has gone up every year for the last 7 years. And the number of classes and programs that are in there has also increased over the last 7 years. But we've reached a point where we just can't maximize the space any further. So obviously we rely heavily on outside ability for space. We use the schools as much as we possibly can. And then during the spring and during the summer season, obviously, we do look to use places like Rothfuss Veterans Memorial to be able to get a lot of the programs that we provide, you know, a place to have them. But we know as a program or as a department that what we've done as a program is really limited out. And you look at some of our areas, we focus our program areas on youth, adult, family, and then what we call DEER. Some people
Right.
call it seniors or 50 plus, but we call it our DEER program, which stands for Daytime Education at Recreation, for those of you that didn't know what that stood for. So that part of our program base has expanded beyond anything that we really anticipated. You know, typically if you show up in our building during the day, that's generally a lower use time, but in our facility, it's actually one of our heavier, busier times because of the number of programs. So we know that moving forward, there needs to be something done from a facility standpoint to accommodate the needs. There's probably a gap in our services that we identified both through the survey and through some of our enrollment reports, where we have a target age range of that 20 to 40-year-old age range, where we're not hitting them from a program standpoint, and we know that. That's why in 2019, our plan from a program sort of emphasis is going to be in that range. The good piece side to that is we don't have to be relying on a facility for that. There are things that we can do outside of a facility for that. So, you know, it's sort of a double-edged sword where we know we have a facility issue, but in the one area that we do need to focus on, we can focus on that in other avenues, whether it's at a piece of property like Shadow Pines with, you know, hiking or biking programs, or at Shadow or at Rothfuss with some sort of an activity. But we know eventually that from a facility standpoint, if we want to continue that growth that we've seen with programs and participants for the last 5 to 7 years, there needs to be something addressed.
When you say facility, you're talking about things for indoor programs like swimming, basketball. What are you referring to? And how much of your current participation is summer versus winter sports or activities?
Should buy that report.
Because
We
we've seen things come in like ice rink, or maybe ice skating outside in the parking lot versus inside in a rink, swimming pools outside, inside, spray parks.
I could give you the.
So when you say facility, what are you referring to?
We do obviously track it by season. Our seasons are the fall, then we categorize our winter, spring as one season. And then our summer season. Obviously, from an enrollment standpoint, our summer season is our busiest season.
Yeah, and
But
that's a facilities
But
for
that's
that.
going to be that's going to be
Fields.
sort of influenced by the fact that we're relying on outside facilities such as the school district, and we're using outside parks to be able to continue to run programs. So a program, I'll use an example, day camp. Our summer day camp is housed out of really 3 facilities. It's housed out of our facility, which is maxed out. Scribner and Bay Trail. Bay Trail we try to use for our youngest or our preschool age. Scribner is what we tend to see as an overflow for when they get closed out of the community center. The community center from a day camp site is maxed out at about 140, sometimes we can push it to 145 kids. But really that's the max number of people that we can actually have in that building safely, within health code regulations, etc. So from a facility standpoint during the summertime, it's obviously going to be inflated because of those numbers. But if you look at what we've done in our programs that are in the fall and then in the winter and springtime, the number of classes, and again, whether you break it down by youth or all the way up to that DEER category, is increased. So from a facility standpoint, it's not necessarily a pool or a track. It's more multi-purpose type of space. Obviously, use of the gymnasium space is key. We rely on the school district, Bay Trail. Right now, we're running a program at Bay Trail for 130 kids on a Saturday morning for basketball program that we just can't house in our own facility. It's nice that we have that relationship from the school district. However, we also are relying on the school district for those practice times for that program. But we don't have precedence over, obviously, over the school programs. So therefore, the school is going to use up their program, their time slots for their program before they go to the town. It's good for us because we're what we call first refusal, so we get first choice after the school district. Problem is, we generally don't get into those facilities till 7:15, and if you're looking to run an activity, especially a youth-driven activity, it's getting kind of late if you're starting a program at 7:30, goes till 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, especially for some of the younger age. So it's, from a facility standpoint,
For winter, like cross-country skiing, do you go to the golf courses or Bristol, or do you do that much?
we don't actually, I don't want to get too far ahead here, we don't actually have a dedicated cross-country ski program.
Right, okay.
We used to do programs such as downhill skiing, we used to do trips and those kind of things, but we realized that sort of service is being met by other groups.
And I'm
So-
puzzled, there've been so many hits or comments coming in, supporting
Cross-country skiing.
cross-country, and I haven't seen any trails yet over on the front 9, and I'm kind of baffled why that is.
Well, I
We
think,
haven't had that much snow yet.
no,
I don't think you really need. I'll go.
We do have snow, and it's been there for a week or
I'll
so.
be honest with you, Bob, what you're gonna see probably in the next, I'll say, again, depending on the weather, and probably in the next 3 to 4 weeks is you will start to see some trails over
When the
there.
kids are out.
We have a meeting that's set up this week with the
I'd love
school
to see it,
district.
because,
The school
all that land
district-
is there, and
The school district has offered to come in and groom trails. They're willing
That
to
was
do
a-
it. They actually have their own groomer, so they're willing to do it.
you don't need broom
big-
trails,
yeah,
the
that's a
first
big-
guy out is the groomer.
Well, if people choose to do so, they'll be able to, but I think for a lot of people, that having the ability to be able to actually go on, whether it's a skate or whether it's a...
Seems to be a lot of interest in it, and I'm just,
If you read, as you read through, and I think that just falls in line with sort of that more passive side of recreation. It's not facility driven. You don't need to be inside. You can go at your own pace. I will say this, we are going to put stipulations around when, part of that meeting is going to be put stipulations about when the school district can and can't groom. It's all going to be based on the amount of snow, where they can do it, because obviously, while yeah, the ground is white, it's actually not, it's not very conducive
does
to
grooming
going to.
consist of dragging a mat across it?
It's basically, it looks like a large sled.
You mat it down, you want to maintain the tracks, but I mean, like you said, first person out helps that. You create the tracks, you create a path for it. Part of the issue is going to be education too, and potentially signage, whatever might come from this. Again, this is early on, like Chris is saying, but there's an education piece where if you're going to do cross-country skiing, people have to be respectful of it, and oftentimes you don't see that, especially in foreign land. New activity for someone
I
in a
mean,
new area.
they break up the tracks.
Yeah, people often will take their bikes through it, they'll
Yeah.
try to walk through it, snowshoe through it, then cross-country skier, I got nowhere to go.
It
I just
happens
lost my whole run.
pretty
Happens a
pretty
lot.
frequently at London, which is a very well-known cross-country. There's a lot of tension between hikers,
Really?
snowshoers, and cross-country skiers.
It's a tough multi-use situation,
Yeah,
you
this
just want a
whole- this whole-
dedicated
A
system.
lot of it's ignorance. I think if
It's
you're
just,
not
yeah,
a skier, you
need to
don't
have
understand the
signage
importance of
education that
it.
says,
Right.
here,
This
you
whole
use
multi-use
this side,
That's right.
hike
Be
off
another
the
challenge.
tracks.
Yeah, a hiker that doesn't ski doesn't understand the importance of having a groomed trail and just figures, well, if it's already open, I can walk down through
Yeah,
it, and then
this is
doesn't
my
realize
trail.
it's ruined.
And
for you.
it's the same thing, and you'll see in those responses, and we heard it at the input, is the multi-use for hiking and as well as biking.
Yeah.
Right. That's the other piece, and actually, I know Terry could probably talk to a little bit more from his involvement on the Trails Committee, but that is one of the things that, especially after hearing the feedback, when I got back, one of the discussions I had with our rep that sits on the Trails Committee is I said, that's something that needs to be sort of brought back up as to how do we get this, how do we kind of meet this need? Because clearly in the community, there is an interest in that. So whether that's through education and signage or, location and where they're, able to go with those, that type of a rec program, that's got to be determined. But obviously, there's enough of an interest that that's something that needs to be
Sounds like a good
addressed.
Eagle Scout project.
Well, so I don't think that there's been the conflict between the cycling community and other winter use until the past couple of years, because fat tire.
Probably not winter use.
Yeah,
That is
not
correct.
winter use, I don't
That's
think, but I
correct.
think that there are other
That's correct.
instances of trail,
Fat
like,
tires will get involved.
what's that?
Fat tire e-bikes, they'll just take over some of those
It's
runs
a-
sometimes.
It's
Absolutely.
fun, but
Yeah,
yes,
sure.
it's, but yeah, that will change the dynamics.
I think one of the important things for grooming trails for cross-country skiing is going to be to make it a lot wider than you typically see at, say, Mendon Ponds or something like that. Because one of the problems is people who are out walking and people who want to ride fat bikes on it as well are going to see the groomed stuff, and that's going to be more appealing because it's easier to walk, it's easier to ride on that.
Right.
So if you only have enough space for just skate skiing to be done on there, and like maybe a set of tracks or something like that for classic skiing, then everybody's going to be trying to use that groomed space. But if that is, twice as wide, it's going to require extra passes and things like that. But
And I think part of it is for us, that's part of the reason why we decided to work with the school district. One, I think they'll be able to work with us easier in regarding to make those changes as the season goes along. Because obviously what we do at the very beginning, and let's just say it's in 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now, if we get enough snow, that may be different by the end, by February, March, when they're out grooming that at that point. How they do it and where they're doing it might change over time, versus just saying, we're going to put cross-country skiing out there and everybody go at it, where hopefully it'll sort of evolve in regards to how it works.
my guess is it'll evolve over the next few seasons too.
Absolutely.
Like where you put trails
What we do this year,
season or-
next
yeah,
year,
not-
we may very well decide, there may be a better way to do it.
Yeah,
And you'll have more participation, and people will start to understand what the rules and regs are for it.
yeah.
You'll have, like, the cross-country team may go in and want to do some things in terms of signage and that kind of stuff that
Yeah.
might help the process.
That will help a lot. We had this problem with my college ski team. The trails that we used were constantly being trampled by walkers and stuff like that, and we made some signage, and that helped out a lot. Just having simple signage just
It's-
showing where the tracks go.
Truthfully, we have that issue pretty much in any park for any one of our activities. We have issues at, Little League with groups that use the ball fields for non-baseball or softball activities. So, you're gonna have that sort of, what I'll say, carry over to any one of those. It's just gonna be, truthfully, it's just gonna be a learning curve for people and sort of an understanding. You would hope that they'd have some respect for those areas and just,
Well, providing broader trails, I think, will make a
Yeah.
big difference. That'll make a big difference.
I did, before we move on, thanks Zach for printing this off. So last year in 2018, the number of programs that we actually had go through our rec track system, we had 1,154. That's the number of programs that actually required somebody to register. Through our system, we took in 12,476 registrations. Again, that's for what?
Before you start, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I see everybody's writing down. We can make this available to you, so you
Sure.
don't have to.
You don't have to
write it
Okay.
down. Save your arms.
So we had 12,000, just over 12,000 registrations come through. And the reason that I point that out is that's how many people actually had to sign up for a program. So that does not count somebody who shows up at the amphitheater and listens to one of the concerts. It doesn't count the people that are at the parade or at the 4th of July for fireworks. That doesn't even count people who go on one of our monthly guided hikes. So those are just people that signed up from a registration standpoint. If you look at the ones that are not what we call rec track numbers, rec track is our registration system. We had over 1,000 participants that participated in our Tuesday senior lunch. As of October, we had 155 people that participated in 10 different lead hikes. There were 89 garden beds that were sold. Penfield players had right around 1,000 people that attended 3 performances. Again, those are done at the community center. Between January and May at the community center, we had over 1,000. We had just over 1,000 pickleball people who signed in to play open pickleball at the community center. So all of those numbers are tracked as well. So to go back to your question, Bob, it can be anywhere from a facility concern, from just program space such as this that's generic, that can be used for a meeting or a lecture or a class, to a gymnasium that's actually used for programs such as pickleball. So yeah, I'll send this info to Zach too, so you guys can see some of these numbers as well.
Chris, what does the town see as needed from like fields? Do you feel we're good with fields type of thing? Because you see a lot of the comments are we more green, some fields, that type of thing. What's the vision for that?
It's a good question. It's probably the one I get asked the most. The concern that we have right now, Tim and I have every year as we go into our field use. Tim is our parks foreman. When we go into our field use system, we're scheduling. The concerns that we have is the amount of usage that our fields get is we no longer have the ability to rest fields. And by rest fields, I mean be able to take them offline for more than a couple of weeks. Be able to take them offline for at least a season. What's happened is a lot of our fields have been used so much is they get tired very quickly and the grass doesn't have a chance to regenerate. So what we're finding is that they're deteriorating at a faster rate, and obviously then that changes safety and the level of play. The other issue that we have is there are some of the community groups that we work with are starting to get where they're maxing space out. Penfield Youth Lacrosse uses a park, the Greenwood Park, for their lacrosse program. They're actually split. They use Greenwood and they use Rothfuss. So they have to take the program and split it. So they send their girls up to Rothfuss and then they send the boys stay at Greenwood. The Greenwood Park is really not suited for the number of kids that are there. It's a much smaller space than what the number of teams and players that they have. And then when they are there together, and especially if there are groups that are coming in from the outside, parking is an issue.
That's a nightmare.
And if you've ever been to Greenwood, you also know the other issue with Greenwood is there's no bathrooms.
Right.
So they have to bring in a porta-john that sits there. So obviously that from a park standpoint and a field standpoint is an issue, but there's no other place for us to move them to. So that's why they've remained at Greenwood. The other issue is for, again, I'll use lacrosse, is their season, the way their season schedule's out, we hold them at Rothfuss. As soon as their season just is starting to tail down, that's when our soccer season is just starting to kick up, which means we have to relocate them from the Rothfuss Park over to Bay Trail because Bay Trail modified programs are just ending. So we relocate them over to Bay Trail for their last couple of weeks while we turn our lacrosse fields into a soccer field. And then that goes back to what I was saying earlier. From a rest standpoint, those fields get no chance to be able to, they go right from a lacrosse field to a soccer field, and then some of those soccer fields all the way through up until November 1st.
And Rothfuss is maxed out?
Rothfuss is maxed out in regards to the fields. The one thing that we're able to do at Rothfuss that we can't really do anywhere else is we can change field sizes. So we can move on a smaller field, we can have an intermediate field one year and make it a larger field the following year. So what that does is it changes sort of the goal mouth of where, the goalie is standing. So it does change a little bit, but from a field standpoint, it doesn't.
And you indicated that lacrosse and soccer can use the same field space.
They use what we classify as a rectangular field.
Dimensions are slightly different, but they're typically on the same field, which beats the heck out of it.
You can make it work, especially from a use standpoint. You generally have a minimum and a maximum size field that is required. So we can make it work, but...
So from a town perspective, there's no vision. It sounds like there's no other fields that we have.
The only other location that we really have right now, Jeff, is at Rothfuss. There are some areas, what I would say to the southeast of that park, that have been at least maintained to the point that if we decide to add some rectangular fields, we could do that in that location. Obviously, there's some other choices in that park but would just require a little bit more work. But that area probably could house, I'll say, 1 to 2 full-size fields in that southeast back corner. A couple concerns to that. Obviously, that's a nice feature to know we have some space. If anybody has ever walked that park, that back corner to the front is a long ways. So if you have to use the restroom, you better plan accordingly because that's a long ways between the restroom and that back.
But they have a restroom. So
but we do have a restroom. So what we've done, what we tried to do is when we program that park is we try to keep our younger kids up closer. Kids to the back. So it's not as big of an issue.
So another concern that I have with Greenwood Park and lacrosse from a personal standpoint is the start of the lacrosse season is typically delayed by weeks because, because Greenwood is not.
Well, part of that is, part of that is the raw season and when they
Is it
begin their
just
raw
the
season.
beginning of the season, or it's not necessarily like how
It's
low or?
usually everything's shut down though.
Okay.
It's not
Yeah, I
just Greenwood.
would say, not to sound like we're generally in the same
No,
boat
it's
as
okay.
everybody else.
I just wanted
And
clarification.
there's been springs where, it's been few, but
okay.
there's been springs where we've been able to start our
Yeah.
lacrosse season on time and normal. Last year was extremely late.
But that's not Greenwood, it's,
That is correct.
universal.
Greenwood
Okay.
actually, from a drainage standpoint, is usually one of our first parks to open because it's actually one of the drier parks. Some of the fields at Rothfuss drain much better than others, so some of those fields will open.
Now, I've seen the parking problem over there.
That relates exactly, and that's actually a very good point. If you throw, just say, 2 more fields onto Rothfuss, that's going to impact the parking. And if anybody has been there on I'll use a Wednesday night, especially during, I'll say in July or June, when it's a beautiful night, and you try to park at that lower parking lot where Jack's Playground is, and then try to find a parking space because you have a lacrosse or soccer activity, between Jack's Playground and the rest of the park going on, it's almost impossible. What we used to call the overflow, where DPW puts some of their millings,
Yeah.
that area now is actually, I've seen cars parked around the millings pile. So-
yeah.
And to go from that to that back corner, pack a lunch.
So, speaking of Rothfuss Park, and it may be not the right time to ask about it, but there were 2 comments during the community forum that said Rothfuss originally had plans for a 50,000 square foot building.
It was conceptual. It was just something that they drew up as part of, to see if they could fit one on the site if they had to.
Okay, so it
It
could
was never
fit.
committed to.
All right, and what would that impact? Like, was it identified as like, where would that be, or was it just purely conceptual?
They did show, well, it was all conceptual, because even the field designs were conceptual at that point in
Okay.
time. It was just the fact that we were trying to obtain money to purchase the property. We
There
had to
was
show, we had to justify it, that's right.
And that's why that, that loop that's out there, because conceptually, that was the location of where, that they had thought of. So when they put that park in, that's what they, they just stuck to that. From a road standpoint, they stuck to that idea.
But again,
Is that-
you would need a lot of additional parking to accommodate just a
Right.
community center.
Absolutely.
As you can see what happens over where he is every day, I mean, that's a busy, busy area.
What is the size of our current community center?
Good question.
Good question. I could tell you. I can find out.
Well,
Actually, I have the information in my office because
It's the
we.
same as Baird Road Elementary School.
It's a portion
If it
of.
were the size of the school, it would have been about 55,000 square feet.
I can pull it out, and the key to that is,
Or
do you want to
5,500.
know the square footage of that facility, or do you want to know, because that building is broke up into 3 parts. So you've got a rec department in there, you've got a library, and you've got
That's the
courts.
good part.
So you've got 3 components that actually occupy that footprint.
I guess well, yeah.
If you could pull one or 2 of those components out of there and open it up for one component, whatever that component would be, it would relieve a lot of the stress that's over there.
From a town standpoint, is there any pressure to increase the size of our public library? I haven't heard anything.
There's a
in that.
letter in your comments that you would have received
Okay.
on there. In the folder that said comments received via email, there was a letter from the library board
Okay.
with their wishes and desires as well.
I
which they
totally
did ask.
not read everything you sent, so.
Yeah.
There was a lot.
I did it, it took a day and a half.
Okay, well, but so, thank you. All right,
it's in there.
I'll look through that.
They did ask to be considered, as a potential use for the Shadow Pines lands. For consideration for the library. They mentioned even the rec center. They understand both programs have stresses over there at their current location. So they said, with an open mind, look at this because there are needs.
Okay.
That picture that Doug pulled up of Rothfuss, that does show,
I should have brought a laser pointer when I was up and down.
This
That
is
would've
an
been
older,
fun.
That's on me.
this is an
That'd've been
older
fun.
photo, I'll admit.
So the way the trail, this is the milling trail that goes around the back park. This is the last field, the farthest field right now that we have. So when you pull in, this would be the closest parking lot. The area that I was talking about that potentially down the road would be back in here. You can see this is where they'll store the goals during the off seasons. But really our main fields is there's a field here, there's a field here, there's 2 small fields here, and then what we have, what we call our micro spaces up here. Can't fit a full field up here. Then this is also a field that we use, some sees as an intermediate, some as a large.
There's the playground
The playground now, it's actually not on here, it's actually right here.
in there.
When,
Oh, I'm gonna load that up.
to go back
It's
to
got
the
more
question
recent
about,
aerial
to
imagery.
go back to the question about, you know, what, from a facility standpoint in the original plan that they had was there was a facility there, but the other thing that they had in the plan, if you go back up, is right here, these were actually dedicated field space. The problem is they made that, because when they were built the park, they made them so small, they were unusable. So actually what they did is, I think it's been probably 6 or 7 years, they filled that area in, and that's why we identified that for where we should put Jack's Playground. Because from a field standpoint, while it's a lot of green space, it didn't provide us any usable field space. So that's why the playground went in that location there versus up here relocating that. This will be the next playground, actually. I think this is going to be looked at in the next 2 years to be swapped out and changed out.
So is there even enough space there to have it as an option for a community center?
Again, I think the concern would be, from a parking standpoint, is a legit concern.
Right.
You know, if you have where are we now?
Different angle,
Okay.
but same thing.
If you
I can see the
put a
playground.
facility up here.
Yeah, what's going on up there?
If you put a facility up on this side,
Right.
which is, you know, pretty level ground, if you
Right.
put a facility up here, then you still have, from a parking standpoint, you're gonna have to address in this space.
Increase the
This,
parking lot.
this coming spring, actually, no, let me get my bearing. This coming spring, right here, in this green space, which is not large enough for an athletic field, is where we're putting in that box lacrosse field.
Okay.
So there's gonna be an actual half-size field, lacrosse field, that's gonna go right there. It's a boarded field, 4-foot-high boards. That's gonna go in that dedicated space. So again, from a parking standpoint, that's gonna have an impact, but the idea is that that overflow will sort of work for that space.
Well, I'm just wondering, like,
But again, don't think,
what the feasibility is at all of this, of having, if we wanted to have a community center somewhere, a new one, what is the feasibility of even having it there at all? I mean, that's what I'm
well,
wondering.
you're right, that would have to be looked at.
That
in
would, I would
terms
say
of
that would have to be.
But again, the community center wouldn't be like you see it today, where you might take components out of the existing community center, maybe recreation goes over there, and then the recreation area opens up to the library or something, or maybe the courts go somewhere else, and that area opens up to maybe the library. It would not be all those components, I don't think, in one setting the way it is now. They are stressing each other out because probably each one of them needs more space, but they can't go anywhere because they don't have any access.
Is this site here, the town hall, all built out?
No, it's not all built out. There are some areas, and you know, we would have to look at the feasibility of possibly even putting something here,
the most
because
part.
there are,
For the most part, we are.
well,
We
but
have
there are
fields in
certain
those
areas
places.
that you could still look at, because you do have a lot of fields here already,
Yeah,
and you do have programs here in the summertime.
right.
So it would be something to look at where maybe one of those components came here, and the other two kind of stayed where they are.
But maybe you could get the courts over here or something. like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I mean, just to open up space for the other units to be able to do what they need to do.
Because there was some concern expressed about moving the courts over towards residential areas.
It's in a residential area already.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Next to school.
92% of the town is
that's
a
true.
residential area, but it would, you know, there's a lot of things to think about when you're moving the courts as to how you're dealing with,
Right.
you know, the amount of people that come to court every day is a lot,
And,
Yeah.
and you need parking for that as well.
and I'll be the first one to tell you that the two components that really don't mix to me, and I can tell you the stories, is what we do from a rec standpoint in courts.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
They just-
easy to imagine.
right.
They
Yeah,
don't mix.
Chris,
there's no
You throw
synergy
a
there.
library into that.
Library, fine, yeah.
you mentioned the amphitheater, is the amphitheater fully booked? So there were a couple of comments for amphitheater on Shadow Pines.
Yep. The amphitheater and I'm gonna go with the assumption that everybody knows right where it is.
Right there.
Is,
Well, that's what I was thinking.
In the past-
These people that brought the comments in might not know we have
I'll
one.
be honest with you, Bob, the amphitheater's been there for 15 years now. Every year when we have a concert down there, I'll get a handful of people that will come up and say, this is the best venue. I didn't know it's been here.
Yeah.
How long has it been here? When we
Yeah,
tell
yeah.
15 years
But
there.
there's lots of
Yeah.
capacity to have more shows,
Yeah, it's,
right? Yeah.
truthfully, where the amphitheater right now is, I think, probably the best venue for it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
It's,
Sloped.
it's naturally sloped, and, you know, there, obviously it'd be nice if we had some more shade. You know, it's probably the one biggest issue we have, but, you know, people have worked around that. It's, from
Oh,
a
it's nice.
booking
It's
standpoint,
great. It's great.
in the past, we've run a 7-week session, or 7-week series. This year, we're actually gonna expand that, we're gonna start sooner, we're gonna go later into the season, so we're hopefully, we're gonna change that program structure, so I don't see that as much of an issue. I mean, obviously, you know, a location like Shadow Pines lends itself, but I think that where it is now is probably one of the
Fine where it is.
best locations it could be.
You don't have any neighbors being impacted by it to speak of.
No, that's nice because you have natural seating
Right.
Yeah.
with the hills surrounding it. It's,
Are the fields behind that well used also?
Yep, those actually, it's funny, they call those, the top set of fields, they call those the new fields.
They were new when I was playing soccer.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, they've been new since I got here, but that's what they call the new fields.
Hey, they're the new fields.
I'll
Been here 40
say,
years.
I'll say this about them, that, and this I gotta shoot.
Shoulda, coulda.
The way they're set up now is,
Like we're gonna be
these are,
using these.
these are two either intermediate or full-size fields. Up here, this area right here is an almost unusable space. For those of you that have played soccer here, in the past, what we've done is we've had 2 full-size fields, and then we put 2 mini fields here that actually go east-west. So the full-size go north-south. This area has become so unusable that what would happen is all the other fields around would be open because the weather's been good and things are dry. These 2 fields would be literally closed. So what we've done for the last,
because
the drainage, it's just poor drainage in here.
The wood.
There's a wetland right next door.
Yeah, right.
All in there as
Right
well.
all through here.
Yeah.
There you go. So what we've done is we actually have shifted all of these fields, we've shifted this way. So we've taken one full-size field out of play, and we've tried to absorb that someplace else. We've had it at the community center, on the school property. We've used Harris Whalen in the past. We just try to move it around wherever we have some ability. So this field, this area doesn't get used, but it's by design because it's so wet. It's almost unusable.
Are all the baseball fields being used?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Plus.
And
Have you been there for open day?
it's probably,
Well, I mean, I think baseball's declining in the US, so I'm just wondering if we're still using all those
They're
fields.
doing a state tournament there. and-
Yeah, I know.
Right, yeah.
I think what you see on the fields, how do you do this?
Red dot.
Okay, so the way that the fields are used is now, these 2 fields right here, actually, these 3 fields right there are the most heavily used fields that we have. Those are where the state tournament's gonna take place. These 2 fields over here, as you get older, because of the number of kids that are playing baseball, those 2 fields don't get used as much. They still get used quite a bit. Actually, up until this year, the Bay Trail Middle School has used that field as their home baseball field. That's where they held a number of their games. Now the school district has put a new field in at Bay Trail.
Yeah.
They were a little behind on their time frame, so this year they expect that field will be open. They've actually converted that now these 3 fields are all skinned fields. That's a skin field, that's a skin field, and that's a skin field. Because their softball program is growing, and also a skin field also allows for the younger kids to have a better opportunity playing, et cetera, learning. So they've taken that field and turned that into a skin field. Their softball program is actually growing.
No grass in the middle.
Skin means there's no grass on the infield.
Yeah.
So as a younger player, it's much easier, you know, when the ball gets hit, you can go a little further, it rolls straighter, it's not bouncing, it's easier to learn on. These fields here in the middle are what they use basically as their T-ball field. So there's really only, or actually 3 fields. These 3 fields here are their T-ball fields. That's their introduction program. So as you look at the complex, while there's a number of fields, they're for different purposes. You're not gonna put,
Yeah.
the kids that play on Ellers are not gonna come up here and play on,
Yeah.
you know, the middle.
And they're not, you can't adapt, you can't change fields
The
as
only
easily
way you
as you
can
can
really
with
do it is
soccer
when
and
some of the
lacrosse.
larger ones and make
Yeah.
them smaller, yeah. The, you know, the Bachman Field is one of the nicest fields in the area, and that's why that field gets used by, you know, not only Penfield Little League, but, you know, we have an adult baseball group that comes in and they use
the one with the
that
lights?
field. That's the one with lights.
How'd they get the lights? Is that a town thing, or is that
That was
somebody?
Little League. Little League did a capital. Every year, Little League does a capital project. You'll start to see this field especially is going to get all new fencing, all new backstops, and that's part of their package to Williamsport.
Did the town have to approve lights?
What's that?
Did the town have to approve lights, or did that have to go through a neighborhood?
Yeah,
or
the town board-
It went through normal procedure, yeah, but from a funding standpoint, it was all paid for through a capital campaign by Little League. We meet annually with all the groups, but Little League for sure, every year when we meet with them prior to the season, they lay out what their plan is for the upcoming season in regards to improvements to the property. We're one of the only municipalities that I know of that has an agreement with the Little League organization for use of the town fields.
Chris, your observations on having outside groups come in and donate, offer to put in, maintain? We've had some of those things, you know, relative to golf driving range, running cross-country ski operation or something. Are there any trade-offs? Are there any downsides to having the Little League come in and put up lights? Do they say this is our field now?
There's probably, I won't lie, and there's going to be some ownership to that when, you know, they invest in, I think, do you remember the dollar amount? I want to say it was around 100,000.
Even up to 100.
Sounds fair.
That they,
right.
you know, put into that, that they put into that field alone. You know, there is some ownership to that. The one thing I will say is whenever we've asked for, you know, use of whether it's a, you know, Bachman Field or one of the, I think they call this camp field now or senior field, for an outside group, whether it's, you know, USABDA or, you know, any of the other groups, or, you know, American Legion even. School district uses this for a number of their home varsity fields. They've been receptive to that. Obviously, there is some cost that we do.
But you find that it works pretty well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a partnership.
Obviously, there's going to be people that would probably disagree with that, but there is, you know, there is a process that's in place. It's not always perfect, but there is a process that at least we're able to get outside groups on fields. Same thing with Rangers and Strikers. You know, Rangers, Strikers, they use, you know, they use these, they use obviously the fields over at Rothfuss for their travel soccer program. Like I said, PYL, they'll use.
You know anything about orienteering?
I looked that up after reading all the comments. I'm like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, it's famous.
It's making a comeback. And I think a lot of it is because of cell phones.
Is that what they did?
Well,
A lot of it was
I'm
because
part
of,
of the Rochester orienteering community, and there are permanent courses at Durand, Webster,
Yep.
Menden. a
Could you
couple
say
of others.
briefly what a course involves?
It's pretty low. I think it's pretty low impact. It's
things to find?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
a stake generally, you know, 5 inches maybe by 36 inches.
Do you need
and
a
it has
square
a s-
mile, or do you need, how much, would the back nine
The
do it?
back nine could support 15,
Stations.
yeah, permanent.
And that would be good?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
It's up to the space as to
Yeah.
the number of markers or spots.
right. So
The
it can
larger the
be,
space, the more they'll
it
have.
can be open space, trees,
Yeah.
very dense vegetation.
Yeah, I would imagine. And there's enough back there, you think?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Some are easy to find, some are more challenging.
Well, yeah, that's the point. So that, like, for example, Mendon Ponds, you'll find one might be in an actual little depression, one could be at a trail intersection.
Yeah.
So depending on the difficulty. That's really low impact, except that it does have people going off trail. I mean, I'll say that. So
Yeah.
some are on, you know, you're on trail and then you're exiting the trail. So in that sense, there's a little bit more impact.
Well, someone get lost too, right?
Ah, yeah, you know, they'll be at your house. They'll be like, open your door, help me.
The whole key is you're using a compass, so if you get lost, you have other issues, I think, as well.
Well, that's when you take out your cell phone.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Pull up this map and you're good.
You're not that far
Google
from the
Maps.
road.
MapQuest.
I think it's a small enough user community too that just the number of people going off trail.
Well, it's
you
mostly the
can't
Boy
really
Scouts,
create
isn't
new
it?
trails or
It's
anything.
mostly the Scouts.
There are a bunch of others.
It's everybody. I think that Pokemon phenomenon several years ago kind of got people into it, and now they started to realize orientation.
I tried it in the Army, I didn't like it.
Come to gunfire, you're not the same.
No, none of that.
One question I had is, I think we have a ton of information that you guys have worked hard to get, and so I appreciate that immensely. But I think one of the harder parts is trying to figure out what we want to do with Shadow Pines, knowing that there's so much space out there. I think it was 2 or 3 meetings ago. Earlier on, we talked about the growth of Penfield, and in 10 years, you know, East Penfield possibly getting a new school because of the sheer growth in population and the housing that does make it into Penfield. I know that there's a 10-year committee that also meets and talks about that. Is there ever a chance that we could co-talk? Because I would hate for us to come up and say, hypothetically, let's do a new library or a community center and expand this and do this, when the 10-year committee is looking at putting a new community center on the east side and having us cross pathways that way.
The answer to your question is yes, certainly we could meet if you wanted to. The 10-year committee, he's referring to the 2020 Comprehensive Plan Update Committee.
Sure.
That committee started the exact same time you did. So they've been going since September. They're going to be going probably through 2019 and probably into portions of 2020. So they're going to be going quite a bit longer than you are. So maybe if you want to get together and have a joint meeting at some point in time, as we're starting to make our recommendations as a group. I don't think at this point in time, it's a big issue right now for them and for the town. I don't think at this point in time, they're not anywhere close to where they have to be to give you some assistance as to what you have to do. But more importantly, as things are happening in East Penfield right now, the thing that drives development in anywhere is sanitary sewer capacity, and there is none in East Penfield.
Right,
and there's probably not going to be some for quite some time yet. The town of Perrington doesn't have any for us. They don't have any for themselves, let alone us. The town of Webster's running into a problem where they don't have it right now, and it's going to take them at least 3 years to figure out what they have to do to get it resolved. And even at that point in time, the question will be, do they have enough for Penfield, or are they just holding on to it for themselves? So those kinds of things are going to really delay any kind of extensive development, if any development, in East Penfield for a while.
So that's just a capacity issue?
It's a sewer capacity issue that's going to cost about $12 million to resolve. So they have, I think, $3 million right now. They're looking for $9 million more somehow, some way. I don't know where they're going to get it, but they need to do at least a 2-year study to determine what really has to be done to bring that up to speed for their needs, as well as anybody else who might be able to hop on the path.
So this is that parcel over at 250 Atlantic that is supposed to be developed. Is that affected by?
That one has nothing to do with it, because that one actually is going to be sewered in Penfield.
Okay.
We're talking more about the outer fringes as you go up towards Jackson Road, as you go up towards the town line, as you get to 250 in the town line, as you get out to like Fellows Road, that area out there to the south, there's really no more capacity for Penfield to do anything.
So most of this area around here all flows up into Webster to Webster's treatment facility. Their facility is currently at / over capacity, what they have. So at this point, they have told us they don't really have space for us to be able to connect any more sewers and flow any more sewers to them. And the south side of Penfield, around here, flows south into Perrington.
He's over by Fellows Road right now.
Fellows.
Yeah, I need a point of reference.
That jog is Atlantic.
This is 441.
That's 441. That's 441.
So start there.
Thank you.
The red is sewer lines?
Sorry.
The red is sewer lines.
And you can see that one by Fellows Road there is going
So
right
this-
into Parrington.
This area goes into Parrington, and they are also at capacity.
They're at capacity. So it's gonna be a while before there's any pressure for development in East Penfield. And the zoning right now is 2-acre zoning as well, which also is a consideration, because nobody wants to build on 2-acre, no housing developer wants to build on 2-acre tracts, they wanna build on 1/4 acre if they can do it. So, I mean, I don't think there's any intent on our part to change zoning for any reason whatsoever out there. At least until there's some demonstration that there's a reason to do it, and there is no reason at this point in
Okay.
time. So I think what you're going to see is probably some of the recommendations, I'm not going to speak for that committee because I'm not even, part of it, but I think you're going to see recommendations that they maintain the character of that area until such time as there's an ability to, provide sanitary capacity. And even at that point in time, there may be a movement afoot to say, hey, we like it green out here, we may want to keep it green. For instance, if you own a 100-acre parcel and you can build 75 units on it, we're not going to rezone it to ½ acre so that you can build 150 on it. You can build your 75 and you can cluster them if you want, but there's going to be a green space left over.
Sure.
And you're going to get the density that you're entitled to under the current zoning. So it's all going to be driven by sewers and the public and the town board's determination as to what should be happening out there 10 years from now.
It does seem we have a lot in common with what's going on with the Penfield Rec. Like they're two separate entities, but they could be very much intertwined as this thing rolls out.
Oh, no question.
And I kind of, the timing of it kind of scares me in that, if you come with a recommendation or you guys have a plan, it may conflict, or it may, Shadow Pines might be seen as the perfect solution for a plan like that. Where it just seems, especially when you read the comments, you see a lot of rec, a lot of fields, that type of thing, where they're very much intertwined. And
right.
And then you get into, well, okay, let's say hypothetically we made it a park or something. Do you want a bar/restaurant right on the same property? So it seems like at least those
Right.
three, and you're right with the 20-year 20-year program they have. They're all very much intertwined, but they're three separate entities right now.
Right.
Where
Well, and I was just going to follow up as part of the staff report, and I'm going to talk a little bit about where we are with the Clark House in a minute. But you're absolutely right, and I think, as Tony said earlier, if you're getting uncomfortable as we're getting closer and closer towards the end, or you perceive to be the end of the process, and you still need more information just to make sure you're not conflicting with something else that's coming out, there's no reason why we can't do that. I mean, we're not going to put you in a position where you're not feeling comfortable with the decisions that you're making. Remember what I said in the beginning, the very first night, it's going to be a consensus issue. You're not going to get 100% consensus on anything. If you do, there's probably something wrong. But if you're going to get consensus in the fact that you conceptually believe that this should occur, this should occur, this should occur, and maybe these things shouldn't occur. I mean, that's really what we're looking. You're not having a master plan at the park area over there. You're not having to do that per se. You're making recommendations to the town board to say, it really would be good if you looked at these options for that property. It doesn't necessarily mean that you got to put it here and you got to put it there and you got to put it there, but these concepts are the things that we're embracing and we're recommending to you that you should be looking at as options.
And those recommendations also go to the comprehensive plan committee as well, as they're doing their work over the next 2 years.
And they may agree with you. They might say they were right on target. We agree with what they're saying to us. Or maybe we got to tweak this because maybe we're not quite there for that. But I think that you're probably going to be aiding them more than them aiding you in the end.
And to tie that into what the rec committee is doing from a master plan, as a facility, as this facility subcommittee, so far the discussion truthfully has been focused on the current facility and the inadequate space that is there. There's not a recommendation.
Not fields, right?
Right. There's
the
no
building itself.
And there's no recommendation as we need to build X number of square foot in this location. This is the current facility, and these are the issues that we have that need to be addressed. And as Jim said, that could be managed down the road, whether that's by the town board or through comprehensive plan. Something else would sort of dictate as to where that would take place. But the rec plan is addressing or identifying those shortcomings that are at the community center now.
And so, are you pretty well set?
I think I went
Does anybody have
way
any
more than I
questions?
thought I would.
Chris talked a lot.
I told you.
You did have a
just
lot
didn't
to
know
say,
it.
Chris.
So just to follow up on the section regarding the report, I just want to give you a brief update on the RFP for the Clark House. The RFP is under the process being prepared right now. I'm anticipating that we should be looking at a final product probably around the end of the year, I would think. And I think the intent on the boards would be at this point in time to probably try and get it out to the public sometime in early February and get that out. There's a lot to think about because you've got to explain to the world what they're looking at, what they're getting into. You got to talk about the mechanicals of the site. You got to talk about what's out there for them to be able to utilize. The other part is we're going to want to set up site tours for interested parties to go through the building just as you did. They're probably going to want to go through it in a lot more depth than you did because their futures are at stake on it as to whether or not they would go in there.
This is for proposals, not
Just for proposals,
That's not solicitation of interest. This
Well,
is-
solicitation of interest in the proposals we are considering to be the
But
same
we
thing.
haven't pushed
right.
anything out yet.
No, we're not
And
going
that's
to. We're not
January,
going to do
February.
that until, first of all, it's got to be finished.
Yeah.
Town board has to review it, make sure it's comfortable with it. Once that happens, then the town board will determine that the supervisor should issue it to the world. It'll go out in the papers, it'll go out on the website, you guys will all be privy to it as well. It'll be provided to the world by the town clerk's office. We'll give them probably about a month or so to, number one, walk through the site. It'll be an appointment-only basis to walk through the site. We're not letting the whole world walk through the site. You've got to demonstrate that you're going to be an interested party to do this, because otherwise the whole world will walk through the site. It'll be on an appointment-only basis for a period of maybe 3 or 4 weeks. And then after that, we're going to give them another month to prepare their final request and send it in to us for review. I anticipate it might take 3 or 4 weeks to look at all of them, especially if there are a lot of them coming in. And then after that, we'll whittle it down into about 3 to 5 to see who's really the most sustainable and is more in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. Some people we're saying that you absolutely have to lease the Clark House. You may be able to lease the other ancillary buildings like the barn and the cart house if you want to, but you have to lease the Clark House first. We're not going to let somebody come in and lease the barn and then the cart house and the Clark House sits there vacant. We're not going to let that happen. You're either going to lease that first, and then if somebody else wants to come in and lease the other buildings for other uses, we'll look at that as an option as well.
Is it too late that the committee might suggest to leave the cart garage out of that proposal? Because Ginny McCullough, for one, and I agreed with her, thought that that's a building really suitable for having a place to rent skis or
Well, depending on the situation, you might get a company that wants to come in and rent skis.
it might be very usable.
You might have a recreation
support
company that
the
wants to
shadow.
do all those kinds of things, skis, snowshoes,
Yeah, I know,
whatever.
I'm just
We
thinking-
don't know. And remember, the town board has the right to reject every single proposal that comes in if they don't think it's appropriate. If somebody wants to have the Rolling Stones in every Saturday night, I don't think you're going to be real happy about that as a neighbor.
I'm
So
just thinking.
we've got to look at this and determine what the scale is. What the scale is for the neighborhood. So that's where we are right now, and as soon as we get something finalized, we will get it to you as a group and let you take a look at it.
To Bob's question, Jim, is it fair to say that part of that issue might be the fact that the golf cart garage is part of the parcel that is the Clark House,
It
and that
is.
is, we're looking at that as its own, not its own entity, but that's a mission in itself, is dealing with that parcel versus the remaining lands.
Yes.
Because it was purchased separately?
Yeah.
No, the cart house is on the property.
Yes.
It's on which, the Clark?
I mean,
The Clark House
Yeah.
property.
I meant the Clark House property was purchased separately from Shadow Pines.
Yes, that's correct. So what'll happen is, I think we're all interested to see if anybody could really come in with something interesting for that site. If they can't come in for something and nobody shows any interest in that barn or in the cart house, there are other opportunities for the town to possibly do something there that might fit in.
Yeah, there were quite a few
Appropriate.
comments that came
Yeah.
in suggesting
Yeah.
a use for
Nothing
that.
is cast in concrete, because if we don't get good responses, and we might not, you never know. We might get great ones, but you might not.
What type of proposal do you think you're gonna get for the courthouse?
We don't know yet, and that's one of the things we're wrestling with, because we've got people looking at you know, how much are we gonna charge for rent? How much are they gonna put into the property?
Yeah, but when are they gonna do it?
When are they gonna do it?
No, you know, when you, well, let's tell you where I'm coming from. I'm thinking the courthouse, and I think we've had some sentiment, especially in the hearing, is a wonderful warm-up there, and as somebody mentioned before, a great park place, maybe to rent cross-country skis and
Right.
things like that.
Right.
So I think it's a natural for what this committee would do. But I'm also wondering when the commercial developer would do with it. It's not a restaurant, I don't think.
No, but it could be something for like a sports hut of some type where you're renting out certain types of things in the wintertime. Maybe you're renting out things in the summertime. Maybe you're renting out bicycling that you could do on the trails or something like that. Maybe you have orienteering club in there operating and doing some things. You don't know yet.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we want to see. I mean, that's what we're going out to find out who's interested in doing what. If we get some really great stuff where you get a group that wants to come in and do cross-country skiing and they're willing to serve hot chocolate there and do all the fun stuff that you want to do with it, why not let them do that if they're willing to pay for the value of the property that we have there? So we'll be looking at all of it. And as I say, the town board has the right to reject or accept whatever they think is appropriate. As that RFP is finished, we will make sure you guys get a copy of it. It'll be in your hands before this group is done with its work. So you'll have a chance to look at it. Again, the interesting thing is going to be is who's going to show interest in any of those any of those buildings.
Jim, can I add on, just as part of this conversation? When you guys start looking at the recommendations that have come through and the recommendations that you personally feel are good uses for the land, that is a very simple thing to add into that land use, is that there's a structure there that can help support that use. So it won't be forgotten, but to Jim's point, there might be someone who comes in with an offer, a proposal that says, I have a proposal that includes both of these structures that maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. And then it's up to the town board to review that and see where it goes. But no one will forget that the golf cart garage, for example, has usability for whether it be part of the Clark House business, whatever goes there, or as part of the lands of the park area, of the open space area. So just keep that in mind as you're going through these recommendations, that you start discussing about what the group feels is an appropriate land use and what existing features there are there to support it, such as the garage there.
And the other part of that too is the town board, obviously, when they're looking at proposals, are going to take your recommendations and make sure that whatever comes into those properties are going to mesh with what you're trying to accomplish on the property. They're not going to throw in something that's totally contrary to what you're trying to do on the site. So it's important that we do get some recommendations from each of it as a guidance.
We can feed that to them.
Right.
Okay. Chris, what's the plan right now for storing the grooming equipment?
It's actually already, the school district stores it at Bay Trail.
They do?
Yeah.
Okay.
So of all the schools, it's probably the closest from an accessibility standpoint.
So are they moving it every time they groom, or are they gonna have to, can they drive it from?
They can drive it. It's actually towed behind the snowmobile.
Okay.
So it's actually.
Yeah, but I guess I'm saying, can they get the snowmobile, like, would they actually take the snowmobile, like, through the intersection or something, or are they talking
I'll
about,
put it
like,
this way, that'll
on a
be up to
trailer?
them to figure out.
They have ways.
As far as I know, that won't be their only location that they'll be grooming, because I know they're grooming right now. They do some of the grooming at Bay Trail. That's why.
Okay, so this would be sold. Okay.
Whether it's going to be their sole or not, I don't think so.
Would you like me to hand out the comment table that we put together, since it sounds like we're starting to discuss these
great
things?
idea.
Okay, take one and pass it around. So again, this was in your email, the latest email from me this evening, and it's just a tabular summary of what staff put together from email responses that we got, from the public information meeting, and from the website comments that were collected over the past weeks. Took all those sources of information, the recommendations that came from the public, and put them in a tabular form, listed out very high level those descriptions of land uses, and then we did a simple tally count and shown in the blue column, and we sorted everything from, it's tallied from its counts, and then just did it alphabetically based on that count if you had a tie for the number of suggested uses. So we wanted to offer this to you as if you didn't have a chance to look through all the comments yet, but this kind of gives you a high-level summary of everything and maybe perhaps a platform to get your conversations going about what land uses you'd like to examine further based on what the initial charge was for the committee. If you have questions, let me know, but obviously a lot of information to digest.
Is there, this should have been asked a long time ago, maybe it was and I don't remember, but is there a budget? Do we have a budget for this project? Like what's our target?
The project being this committee or like implementing uses on the land?
Yeah, like our recommendations.
The town board had no money in the budget last year, as you can imagine, for the park because they didn't know if they were going to get the acquisition or not. So this year, I think they have installed money into the budget for the park for maintenance, and a lot of this will occur. I mean, a lot of it will occur because the staff will be able to provide some services to it. We'll have volunteers. I know the Trails Committee is excellent about doing what they do in Penfield. They basically develop the entire system themselves. But again, a lot of it will also be depending on how intense it is or how much money is needed. We would have to go for grants and that type of thing, and donations. And we get a lot of money in for different things for donations and whatever's available to us. So it's a long process. I mean, if we did all the things that were on this list, if they were all acceptable to you,
yeah,
it would take many years to get these things.
But that's what I'm getting at. Like, I mean, we could say we have so much space there. You could say, oh, we need a community center there, and some new fields and a dog park and a spray park and a swimming pool. But
well, I think
what's realistic.
The supervisor's really good about saying if you got big projects, start biting them off a little bit at a time, and they all kind of work out. So I would think that, for instance, if trails were, and it appears trails are a very needed issue out there, we would start working on a trails program out there of some type, and we have some great people that can help us do that. If it's biking, we can work on that. And maybe you have separate trails. We don't know. We got to talk about that. Maybe you have bike trails versus hiking trails, so never the twain shall meet and nobody gets hurt. If you're going to do things like snowshoeing and cross-country skiing, those are kind of simple things you can implement right away because you have the help of the school district to do that. And then again, it depends upon who comes in there as a potential vendor. I mean, if you get somebody into the cart house who wants to do a lot of these things and they're willing to pay for it in terms of getting some kind of revenue in return, a lot of this kind of starts falling into place depending on who you get and what they want to do there. So
there's a lot of moving parts at the same time.
Yeah, there's a million moving parts to it, and it's brand new. Let's face it, we haven't even owned the property for a year yet, and we're already talking about what we want to do 5 years, 10 years, whatever, down the line on this thing. So, you just start with little bits of it at a time, get those things put into place, and as you're doing that, then you can start building around those things that you really like the trail system. The trail system's kind of there right now. It probably needs to be embellished, in certain locations, and again, it just depends on what you want to fit in to meet your needs as a recommendation.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. In order for us to move a little faster, is focusing on the trails and say, at least, I mean, we could parse this out into different, got the back nine and the front nine. You could start with the back nine and say, okay, that's a natural fit for trails. Let's start working on a trails plan for that, or have the trails committee do that part. But I think we can move fast if we start kind of looking at it as two separate spaces. And I mean, it's clear that trails are the #1 thing that people want. And the people that said open space also said trails. Like that was like hand in hand.
Conflict.
No, they don't conflict. Exactly.
And I think we're going to have to go through and we're going to have to rank these and determine what you think is appropriate. I mean, these are what people gave you in terms of the number of people that got up and told you what they wanted. You're the committee. You have to make some decisions or recommendations. Is this appropriate? Is it got to be modified a little bit or shifted in terms of how you want to do things? In terms of we can get this done this year. We can't get this done until 2 years from now. You got to look at what you can get accomplished in a reasonable time frame, so there is some movement forward as to how you're going to use the properties. And I agree with you. I think you take and you block them off. the north property, the south property, because they are totally different in terms of topography and use. And you want to see what you can do. Maybe you can do some things on one that you can't do on the other for one reason or another. So
This is certainly very helpful.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Just to add, go on, sorry.
I was just going to say, so for the next meeting or so, we're kind of getting a little late in the night tonight, but we could even start if you wanted. But we're going to have to spend some time on this and start determining what you think is the most important and how we're going to get it done in a reasonable time frame. And you maybe want to set, near goals, medium goals, and then long-term goals.
That's what I was
for each
going
one
to
of
suggest.
them. And that, that helps us then determine if we've got some immediate goals and some short-term goals, we should be probably looking for money to accommodate those first, and then start working on the others, down the road long-term.
Yeah, I think the trails are the lowest hanging fruit we have.
Yeah.
Like, just
And there's some other things there.
start
I mean,
working
you
it.
look at, the hiking part of it, the snow aspect of it. You can do a lot of things with snow, and it doesn't cost you very much to do
Or
that.
bike trails as well.
Bike trails,
Yeah.
all that stuff could happen. And we've got a lot of people that can help make that happen. So.
I'd like to hear from these groups.
You want
I'd
more?
like to know a lot more. I came up with 12 different.
Well, we certainly can bring them
I'd
all
like
in
to
if you
invite
want. I
in,
mean, I
like-
don't know how much you want to take, but
Yeah,
if you
before
need
we
people to
start.
come in and talk to you about certain things that they need as part of the proposal, they might tell you they need things that maybe we can't provide them, or they got things that are so simple it's the easiest thing in the world to do. You
One of
might
the
want
things
to
I'd like to hear about is more about multi-use trails. What does that mean? I mean, for bikes, for mountain bikes, for walkers with dogs, for
Right.
children on tricycles, for people in wheelchairs, for runners.
Right.
I think we have to put a little thought into that. I thought Terry,
more than a
you
golf
and
cart,
Nels
Matt.
Carmen could come in
Sure.
and tell us
Yeah.
what are some
Yeah,
of the
and
possibilities.
you might embellish the trails that are out there now, probably put some kind of a divider in them, so you got bikers on one side, you've got, they might, as Eric mentioned earlier, they might have to be widened out quite a bit, as we talked about skiing and hiking, but.
And I'd like to hear from the, Brian Lilly and Anna Gold about their thoughts on
Yeah,
how to
we can
do
bring
the
them in.
cross-country skiing. And there was, what's his name, Sanders, wants to run a
Yep.
driving range.
Right.
Sounds like a good idea to me. One thing we haven't talked about, and we should, is this buffer zone. There's a 200-foot exclusion zone.
Well, it
Along
really
roads.
pertains
You did
to
bring it up.
construction.
Yeah, I know, but can we put a parking lot in there?
You cannot put in structures.
It said, just the
What they're
the,
trying to
purchase
prevent,
agreement says driveways and
Right.
trails.
what they don't want
Didn't
is
say
they don't
didn't say
want.
parking lot, didn't say ball fields.
No, but they don't want structures in there that, it's a habitability issue where you have a structure in there, you might have a party going on, if a blast takes place and somebody is nervous about it and has a problem. They're trying to get you in a situation where they're trying to create that buffer from the quarry area. So they are allowing things to occur in there, they're just not allowing structures. And I think a lot of that was driven early on, before the town, showed a lot of interest in the property. It was shown early on because there was a concern that housing might go on that
Right.
site, and they wanted to buffer those houses away from
Yeah, I
that
know,
quarry.
but the purchase agreements fairly
They were
specific.
adamant about it. They held
Yeah.
through that they did not want structures placed along that right of way. So
In case you don't know what we're talking, there's a map that shows this.
yeah, I think they all saw
200
Yeah, we
that.
saw it.
Mhm. So it's a function of, again, coming up and finally master planning that to accommodate. You might need parking areas for certain
Yeah.
things. If we do shelters, for instance, you got to put shelters in locations where they're easily accessible. And you don't have to carry your coolers 400 miles, as he was saying, to go to the bathroom or to go to the
Yes,
shelter. So there's a lot of things that, eventually that would get master planned out by a
Do
consultant.
we
of some
owe it
type.
to the school district and the library to have them come in and make a pitch?
Yeah, if they're willing to come in, I'm sure the library would love to come in and talk to you if they could. The school district
I'm
might want
appalled
to
at the
as well.
thought of a bus garage, but we ought to listen.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you're being
Not to
objective.
that.
You're being objective, and that's your
No,
charge, is to
I
be
mean,
objective.
Well,
It's there.
no, I mean, our charge is to do what our town wants us to do.
That's right, you're looking at the
And
entire
there's no one
community.
on here that says bus garage, so I don't really feel the need to.
Yes,
give
well,
that
yes,
time.
yeah,
Four.
There's a couple.
You did receive it here. And I think,
It does?
in fairness, you've
10
got to
acres.
look at every option. I mean, you can't,
Right.
you shouldn't just be picking and choosing. You've got to look at them all, because you might find after they've made their play to you, that, you know, maybe it's just not there for you. Or if there's something there that can be done, let them prove to you that it can be done, but you're probably, you know, you're gonna walk into it probably saying you don't wanna do it, but I think as a courtesy, you should listen to everybody who wants to come in and talk.
One final, and I'm off at them.
No, it's okay.
What about, do we need consultants or experts in terms of green space planning?
Yeah, design, yeah, that's,
You know,
that's a question.
I don't think you need to do that
Genesee
right now.
Land Trust to Zaretsky, you know, from...
Well, Genesee Land Trust, their primary function is to
Well, I know, but I
preserve-
mean that type...
Well, they would want
do we need to
they would
listen?
want the land, and we're not
Yeah,
going to
well.
give them the land. So, I mean, there are people out there that could give you some recommendations as to what you might want to do with the green space.
But I mean, we're dabbling in, you know, community planning here.
But you're not really doing the master planning. You're really looking at what your preferences are for the uses. Where those uses go in the future are going to depend on some consultants coming in and saying, hey, your bathroom should be here because your parking area is here, and if you're going to do that, you put your shelters close to the bathrooms. Maybe you want to have trails here. Maybe you want to embellish what you have here. Those kinds of things. We're not in the process of master planning the site out. We're in the process of determining what your preferences are and your recommendations would be to the town board. So if you do want to bring people in, not a problem. We can do that for you. I guess I just need to know what the value and benefit would be if we did bring somebody like that in. But certainly, I do agree with you. If you want to bring anybody in, one of these agencies that came in to talk at the public meeting, by all means, we can contact them and bring them in for you if you'd like to. And we might do a couple at a time so you're not just being dragged out week after week on these things. And I think we are going to be meeting on a more regular basis after the holidays.
Yeah, if you want to get into that, I mean, Alan, do you want to get into the schedule now, or you want?
Well, I prefer not to start and then break it up. Maybe we'll just hold off on that. But let's just talk about your availability for next year in terms of, you know, amping this up a little bit to be twice a month instead of, you know.
Yeah, we're looking to get back into the twice a month, every other week situation. I started outlining it at the bottom of the agenda for you. You know, we took our holiday break to respect Thanksgiving, and the other holidays are coming up here. So starting January 15th, it's going into an basically every other week basis to keep the conversation going. Tuesdays, 7 o'clock, no changes on that. So.
And everybody's good with that? Okay.
Yep.
No objections, it sounds like.
Sounds good.
I know there's one date in February that actually two dates in February that I will not.
Well, that's okay. Your track record's been pretty good with us already. So. And I don't want
Just letting you know, right?
Yeah, and I don't want you all to feel, you know, shamed by the fact that you can't be here. We understand. You've got things you got to take care of. There's vacations. There's family things. We do get it, but we really do appreciate your attendance as much as you possibly can, and your attendance has been great so far. So don't panic if you have to miss a meeting or something. Even staff's going to be missing meetings at times. We have one missing tonight, so it's not a big deal. So don't worry about that. But
they'll pay for it tomorrow. Don't worry.
But yeah, but if you're still good with Tuesday nights at 7, then we'll hold on to that, and we'll keep everybody abreast as to what's happening at the meetings that you might miss. And with that, I think what I would like to do is we're going to let you go home. It's getting on towards 9 o'clock, but I think that the next meeting we will start going into the recommendations and see what people want, and maybe we'll start thinking about it. There's, you know, we can have discussions about each and every one of them. Some of them you're going to probably just love right off the top of your heads, but there are other things we've got to wrestle through, and we should do that and start in on this. It's going to take probably a couple meetings to get through it. And then if you need people to come in and talk about the various issues that, you know, you're not comfortable with or need more information on, be more than happy to bring them in for you.
Can I throw something out there to this group? And I'm just going to throw this out there, and if it sticks, great. If it doesn't, then that's okay too. But can I suggest that we individually go through this list and send an email to either Jim or Zach about our top 10 choices and see if any of that intersects at the next meeting, so that we all come up with some kind of common, okay, well, all, you know, we have these top 5 items that we all agreed on, and I think that's probably a really good way to get the conversation going.
Well, I think there's some value in talking through them though before, because we may not know what does it mean, what is this, what does it entail.
So maybe take one meeting to flesh out some of those.
Yeah, we can do a matrix for you. As a matter of fact, what we'll probably do with you at some point in time is break you down into little subgroups. We'll let you talk talk through these things and have you come back and do a matrix of importance for each one and see where you come on it. Because I think you're right. I think in the end, you're going to have to develop some kind of a matrix that identifies what you find to be the most important.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you couldn't make 50 recommendations, but you certainly want to put your stock in the top 10 or the 10 top.
And we're talking about prioritizing.
Yeah, and my only thought of saying that is that, like, I can look at this list and I can tell you the top 5 things that I really like that we should, that I think we should talk about.
In a lot
That
of
may not be the
these
case for
cases,
everybody.
Guys, hold on. One conversation at a time. It's impossible.
The idea of multi-use trails, hiking, snowshoeing, cross-country running, whatever.
Yep.
I'd be more comfortable if I can get some direction as to, I don't know, standards or guidelines as to
What they
how
might
to
look
set
like.
up multi-use and what is inappropriate
Okay.
in multi-use.
We could do that for you. We could find some, and that's probably a good reason to bring in some of the people we're talking to.
Yeah.
But we could bring in some people that deal with trails on a regular basis, multi-use trails and what they've done in other communities that work and some that don't work.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could do that for you.
Apparently Webster has a trail system that I've seen referenced.
Webster actually has a very nice trail system. I'm surprised.
They're good.
But it's very good.
I'm not familiar with it.
But you might be looking at something different than what you see even in this area. You know, you go to Europe and you see a lot of bike trails that are adjacent to hiking trails or sidewalks or whatever the case may be, and they keep them away from the hikers for obvious reasons. So, yeah, we can find some criteria for you to take a look at.
Yeah, that would really be helpful.
Yep,
Yeah.
we could do that for you.
All right.
We'll try and get that out for you for the next
Fat
meeting.
bikers and cross-country skiers.
Susan, did you finish saying?
Yeah, did you have a chance to finish what was going on over there?
Right, no, yeah, it's fine. I was just thinking that, like, you know, my only thought around that was I'm looking at this list and I'm saying to myself, well, I see 5 things on here that I think we should explore further, and I'm wondering who else is kind of like in that same wavelength. Like, things jump out at me looking at this, and I just feel like
Some
at some point
seem
we're all,
like easy choices.
yeah,
and-
exactly.
So you're going to have those, but I do agree with you. I think you need to sit down and kind of wrestle through them and talk about them. And you might all come to total consensus on the top 5. You know, I think you probably will actually. But there's good reasons to talk about it and find out what the perceptions is from everybody's thoughts. You might not think exactly the same way as to how they are, but you might get them all in the same top 5. So, yeah, it's a good idea. And as I say, we'll start in on it, and it might take a couple meetings, and we'll have to get some more information for you as we go through it on different things. And we'll bring some people in for you as you need them.
Do you think we need some sort of set of criteria to evaluate each of the proposals, like cost,
Yeah.
In your charge.
traffic? And,
We do. We have matrices for that. We do it for everything. that we
Eventually,
do.
we've got to get to that.
Cost,
Yeah.
short-term, long-term.
Yeah.
I mean, what he's describing has been in the charge the whole time.
Right.
So
Right.
that's going to
Right.
guide you once you figure out what your top 5, 6, 7, whatever that magic number is of those recommended land uses. That's when you break up into subcommittees to further analyze these uses based on what the charge is
Right.
as part of your overall report. So that stuff's been in place since
And
day
then we'll
one.
build that matrix for you once all the committees come back together as a group and we figure out whatever. It's kind of like what you said. You might like number 3 as your number 1 choice. You might like number 2 as your number 1 choice. Once we get the consensus on what they all are, then we'll be able to rank them out and then start writing a report back as to what's necessary.
When we did the moratorium committee, all the comments that came in were posted on, you know, on the webpage, and these will be there?
Yeah.
These will be there also?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, everything's on that site.
Well, nothing's on the website yet. We've been collecting and
But it will be,
processing.
but it will
Yes,
be.
we're working
As time
towards
goes
that.
on.
Yeah, I don't-
I want to share that letter from the library with some of the guys I know and the Friends of the Pines group, because one of them talked to the library back some time ago, and they said, we don't need space. So,
Depends on.
Well, we'll have
Yeah, I know.
Buddy
I just wanted
Brickman
to
come in
see
and
the
talk
letter.
to us about what really she does need. and
I'm
what
going to
she
share
doesn't
that
need.
letter with them. Yeah.
I think it comes back to what Chris was saying also, is the fact that what holds up their ability to have space if they did need it, and I don't know if they do or not, but if they did, is the fact that there's conflicting uses over there with her right now. If one of those went away, she might have what she needs there, so who knows, you know? But that's gonna be up to you to make that determination once you hear from Bonnie on what she wants to talk about.
As a one-off, Zach, did you send something out about, or you traced the distance of the existing paved cart paths?
A while ago?
A mile and a half, I think I got in the notes
Was
somewhere.
was that a recent email that came out?
Not recent, probably before Thanksgiving.
Okay, all right.
I believe I had a map in the meeting 3 folder before the public information meeting. I believe I shared that map
Okay, I'll look into that.
on Google Drive.
Thank you.
Just as a point of reference, since Doug's on this map now, I did want to just point out to everybody so everyone is clear on this. The community center, which is 1985 obviously, that has the library, courts, and rec. The property around that is actually school property. There's a lot of confusion on that, and people believe that it actually belongs to the town. You can see the yellow line. The green space that the town owns is actually the piece out in front and by Baird Road.
That tiny little green space right there?
Basically, when you step up the parking lot, you're on school property, but there's a lot of people that automatically look and see the softball field or the baseball field or if there's
And that makes sense because it used to be the Baird Road School.
Sure,
So
yeah.
we just split that out when we bought it, and that's what they gave us, which was minimal, so.
Do we have any other, like, communities around here that we could use as benchmarks that might be willing to come in and talk to us about what they've done in their...
Do you know many communities that have gone through this?
What?
Do you know
I'm
many
sorry.
communities that have gone through this?
All of them?
Yeah, the one in Indiana.
Well, no, I mean, like,
We're not bringing people in from Indiana. We don't have a budget for that.
I mean, I'm just thinking if we
I would say
had a
research. I would say
benchmark-
research what other rec programs have, what other communities are offering. I mean,
Right.
they post so much information out there right now that gives you a good benchmark to do a compare and contrast. If something jumps at you to say, I'd like to contact them, we can shoot them an email. Everything's so accessible these days. If you see something that grabs your attention, write it down, and it's a follow-up item. I certainly agree that you want to ask other communities what they're doing.
or what's
Successful.
or what's most popular, or you know what they really
Yeah, or
what they
things,
see.
things that we haven't thought of yet that
Yeah.
might be a real interesting thing for the community to have that we haven't even slightly thought of. Yeah, absolutely. Think outside the box.
Speaking of interesting ideas, I was curious to hear more from Mark Scuderi, who had the proposal for the
Yeah,
soapbox.
he is asked to come in and visit with you, and I think we should probably let him do that as well.
I don't know if anybody else.
And some of the things you're thinking about, as you know, as we talked, somebody mentioned the
Lance had also said that
driving
in his
range.
email.
And Mark Scuderi, you know, thinking about the acreage that they need, their acreage needs, you know, and how much, you know, you think that they should have versus how much they really want, that kind of thing. If there's value to having them be there, or if there's not value, you know, those are things you're going to have to wrestle with for your recommendations. But I agree. I think we should bring in people.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I like to hear, because if they say, well, we need 50 acres to do it, then it's going to be
Right,
crazy to say, no,
exactly.
they're probably not going to do that.
Exactly
you know?
right. So, you know, you gotta take all those weights into consideration as you're making your final recommendations.
And things like that, if it's paved, are not reversible. I mean, things like trails are reversible. If it doesn't get used, you can do something else with it, but it's something to think about.
Well,
Criteria.
you're right, and you know, anything's reversible, but how much is it gonna cost?
Right. No, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
But one of my thoughts was, you know, I'd be really curious to hear from him, what do some of these other facilities use with that space when they're not using it
Right.
for soapbox? Are there other uses that I'm just not thinking of that,
You know,
is there,
that's a
like,
good point. And when
skateboarding,
if we
downhill
bring him in,
skateboarding races
we
or
will
something?
ask him to provide you with some, you know, if there are other facilities around the country that are doing this, what is it they really need? How much
Yeah.
are they gonna take
Yeah,
on?
he specifically mentioned Salem, Oregon, Sanford, Florida, Akron, Ohio, and suggested that we would only use 1% of the proposed space here.
There's
for the-
something I wonder about when you get down on the back 9 and the wooded sections that are going to be great for trails and orienteering. There's a lot of property lines that come down from Sawmill Drive and even Huntington Meadow go way down in there. It's going to need some sort of posting or identification. And
You're right, and as we were doing our surveys along Sawmill Drive, we were finding people who were encroaching into their backyards to make them bigger, or dumping stuff on the town property.
Another thing I worry about, you ought to have the back 9 posted. There's bow hunters going in there for deer.
There are.
They shouldn't be hunting on town property. That's not.
I know, but it's DEC 8C. It is open for deer hunting unless it's posted
Well,
with bow.
it's a good
Shotgun.
point. And that might be one of your recommendations in terms of what doesn't happen there.
Yes.
Webster does a good job of that on their part.
Do they?
A lot of
We'll
the
talk
parks
to,
and
we
hiking
will talk to
trails.
Tony and to our facilities group
I
tomorrow
won't say
about
where it's
that.
happening,
Yeah,
but
'cause
I've
that's-
seen.
You've actually seen hunters on that site?
I've actually seen a guy in camo with his bow under his arm.
That's good to
walking.
know. I appreciate you telling us that.
Oh my gosh, that's really upsetting.
We'll talk
That is
about that.
upsetting.
That's really upsetting to me, because I live around there and there's tons of deer, and I can see how a hunter would want to do that, but
Following,
He's entering
Well,
from
he
private
shouldn't be on town property
Uh,
doing that.
He's entering, he may be
maybe it's just not
in
signed.
that individual's backyard, but there's not much
Well, if it
backyard
needs to be
there.
posted, we'll talk about that
Yeah.
with the supervisor
All
tomorrow.
right, well, so I'm gonna say that coming from kind of a corporate background, you use a lot of the 80-20 rule, right? So you've got a lot of suggestions here. And if you were to draw a line as to where most of the public input is coming, I'm just gonna pick out a couple of things. Even orienteering. Two inputs on orienteering, soapbox derby, one. Like, let's make sure that we're focusing on what our community had as input. You've
Benefit to the
And this would
probably
take all day
got,
if we.
you've probably got
If we came back 6
Exactly.
years looking, you know, if everybody came in that's on this list, we'd never.
That's-
We're not going to bring everybody.
That's where I
For
was
instance,
going.
that couple that was here tonight, they were here because they had submitted a letter a while back requesting it, and I think they're willing to help pay for it, if I'm not mistaken.
They had funding.
They want to put up a
were collecting.
memorial gazebo to a family member.
Right.
That's something, you would not bring them in to talk to them about that. That's something we would work out with them at some point
Right,
down the line.
right.
But
And
I
there's
would
probably 100 of those
I'd
out
say you
there.
can, at the top four, you've got 150 plus inputs versus the bottom 30,
That's why we made the matrix.
right?
Right.
You know, so at some point, and the idea of prioritizing and looking at the top five, there's some great ideas in there. And even there's some ideas that might actually fit up there.
Right.
Snowshoeing, that doesn't have to have its own category.
yeah, yeah.
But be reasonable that we need to take the input of our own community that voted overwhelmingly to have, like, let's buy this property. But you don't need to look real deep.
That's something you can look at too from this list is, are there things that you should combine into one category? I mean, we really-
Right.
Our
Six
job,
all
our
overlap.
only
The top
goal-
six.
Let's be honest.
our only goal through the last 48 hours was to take the comments,
Yeah, you did a great job, thanks.
Right.
get them there,
Mhm.
find the verbiage people were using,
Yeah,
and
repeat
put them there for you to
words and-
see, so something wasn't overlooked.
Yeah.
Clearly, things probably should be grouped together more, but we didn't want to take it that far yet.
Yeah,
I
you,
think that's part of the next mission in the next 2
Right.
weeks, or next month, is to look at these and say, all right, well, maybe we pare this down, maybe it's not as long of a list, and now these votes go into a different. Another thing too is if you find something that has low votes, well, it's probably because that only came in the night of the public information meeting, and most people either didn't hear that, didn't see it,
Didn't
and
consider
then
it.
didn't consider it as part of the public, didn't have a chance to respond to it through the web submission form. If you still feel it's, like you said, if it's an applicable use, maybe it is something that gets moved up, even if it has a low vote. or
Well,
not.
some of these, I mean, you look at disc golf, I mean, you don't really have to do much to accommodate a disc golf course.
Right.
That's just stuff that you would just do as a program or everything,
Right.
anything else.
Those are
But
some of them are
you're
easy.
absolutely right. What you're really looking for is you're looking for what is the most benefit to the community.
Right.
How many people can be served by this area and get the benefit out of it versus just an isolated group.
And that's where I was going before when I said I don't think we really need to look at a bus garage, because there's four votes. It's not at all what most of the community wants. So why would we spend our time
Yeah, good point.
doing that?
Where would one go though, when we do need to
I-
expand and
But
increase?
that's
Not
not
a
our,
problem.
that's not, I feel like that's not our charter. Like, our charter is not for the school district. Our charter is for the people of Penfield.
That's why
Well,
we have a
if you have
group of people to
kids, you're
discuss
the people
this.
of Penfield, and I think you may not want to do it. I think, though, you might want to at least let them come in as a courtesy. because you might learn something from it, or you might not want it even more than you thought initially, or you might find something that is different than what we all perceive it to be. I don't know.
Okay, we can make an exception for that, but there's like cemetery. Do we want to bring cemetery people in?
No, I don't think a cemetery. I mean, it's somebody's personal. It's somebody's personal wish, I guess. But I think realistically, there's and we can talk about this as to why you don't, because there are state laws governing cemeteries that. I mean, you have to maintain that in perpetuity, basically.
Yeah, I don't need to talk about it. I could say, like, it's below the line.
That's right. But the big issue is, as a taxpayer, you know, and I'm not pushing it, I'm just saying, as an observation, as a taxpayer, they will have to go out and buy land somewhere else. And if you're in the Penfield School District, which most of us are, we're going to pay for that before we're done. So, not pushing it, as Tony mentioned, we're here to support you. But as I said in the very beginning of this whole process, every idea it merits consideration, whether you want to do it or not. In the end, at least you have the courtesy to see what they want to do. And it's your you know, if, as a group you feel that you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. We're not pressuring you into doing anything you don't want to do. If you find that you don't want to have them come in, that's fine too.
Well, I think we have to keep in mind also that this is prime property. This is really, like, you know, when we think about what should go there, that the aesthetics of the area are emotional to people, and that's one of the reasons why we had the huge turnout of voters, and why so many people came and said open space, open space, open space, because it's important to the community. So we have to keep that in mind.
We're going to let you as a group determine what you want, who you want to come here to talk to you. So you guys can work that out and just let us know your thoughts.
Make that part of your homework between now and the next meeting, is based on these
recommendations. Start thinking about who you really do want to see come in.
Based on the information meeting that was held, if people were offering their time to come in and talk to you, jot that down and say, all right, this is someone I'd like to hear. Does everyone else feel that way? We'll get it set up.
Or if you don't want to hear cemeteries, you don't want to hear cemeteries. That's okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, yeah, brainstorming, this is kind of the brainstorming part, where you don't judge and then you apply some reason to this. And say, okay. And I certainly didn't mean to, like, poo-poo any one particular.
Yeah,
you know,
I was only
maybe the
mentioning that
soapbox
because
derby guy will come in and say, we only need 1%, and we could bring in revenue, and we could bring in whatever. So
the other thing to think about is if somebody comes in with a use that's, let's say, iffy, and maybe it never flies, but if they bring in something that says, hey, we'll do X, but we know you're not comfortable with X, we'll provide you with Y and Z, which is something you really want. You kind of got to look at it just to see if it's worth your effort or not to do it. You might not want to do it when you see all the total package, but if it provides you with new bike trails, or it provides you with something else that you really want short term, something to look at. You know.
I'd just like to say, from the work that I've done on the moratorium committee and watching the turnout, what was said at the referendum, for me personally, I'm starting from the baseline that if it's not green space the way it is right now, it has to be justified. So I'm not in favor of the bus garage, but I thought we ought to hear what the justification is. But if it's anything that's going to damage the beautiful space we have right now, I want to have a really good case made to do that, and that's just where I'm at right now.
That's a fair statement.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing you haven't mentioned, and hasn't come up tonight, and it's sort of, I think, percolating just below the surface, is that issue of zoning. I do think we should address that, because, well, I just think it's one of the most important things we can deal with.
Well, zoning doesn't apply to the property anymore because the town owns it. The town can supersede zoning anytime it wants. And that's how you end up with a highway garage over on Jackson Road in an R1 zoning district. They do what is needed for the community. So zoning, when it applies to you know, the public going out and purchasing land for whatever it is they want to build houses or do whatever they want, that's a different issue. Now you've got to have controls. The town supersedes its own zoning in every case by law.
Well, as I remember in the discussion we had, I think I remember how it came up about a month or 6 weeks ago. We learned from you fellas that, I think we learned from you in fact, Jim, that if the area becomes zoned for parks and recreation, then, well, my sense is it becomes locked in for perpetuity. Is that correct?
It was the youth.
That's not what drives the perpetuity issue. What drives the perpetuity issue is if we accept funding from the state or from the federal government.
Yeah, okay.
That's what causes alienation to occur. It's not the zoning. The zoning now is immaterial because the town owns it. But if we accept money, and we may very well do that. I mean, most of our parks we've received funding from a state or a federal agency for uses.
Well, wouldn't that be nice?
We may do that.
Wouldn't that be nice too?
You know, if we needed say we needed a $500,000 grant to build, I don't know what, more hiking trails or something like that on the property, or shelters or something of that nature, and we accept that money as the grant, that locks it in. You're now basically a park.
Well, speaking for myself, I think this is how I feel personally. That this wonderful property we have there, I see it as a trust. And I see my goal, my personal goal, is to see that it remains a beautiful and natural piece of terrain for as long as possible. I just think it's something we ought to address.
Right. Well, I mean, you could make a recommendation if you wanted to. There is no park zoning that I'm aware of at this point in time. It could be created, I guess, but there is none that I'm aware of. That might be a recommendation that you want to make is in your final product, that the property at some point in time look to a rezoning for recreation or parking. You got to be careful when you do that, though, because when you have parks, things happen in parks like Harris Whalen Park that a farmer gave the town of Penfield, and now you have lights, and now you have baseball fields, and you have others. That's not necessarily what you might want there long term. You probably won't get it short term because we don't have any money to do it, but the next generation out might say, hey, we want a baseball field out there. We want something that the public comes to and is able to enjoy. Maybe they want an amphitheater with music and stuff out there. Once you start going into that kind of zoning, it's not just open space when you deal with parks. And you can look around the country. There are zonings that have parkland, that kind of thing. It becomes other than that. Because what happens is, not everybody all thinks the same way in a community. And you get 36,000 people, now all of a sudden, half of them want something that you never envisioned it happening on the property. You gotta be careful about it.
Well,
you can think about it in more detail as time goes on. We've got plenty of time to do that.
if Shadow Pines had been zoned for some sort of open space, it would have saved the town and the taxpayers $3.5 million.
Well, you got to also remember when you take value from a property that currently is allowing half-acre zoning on it, it doesn't matter now because we're not going to do anything like that. But if you could build a house on a half-acre and you've got 211 acres to do it on, that's a lot of money for that property. Now you turn around and rezone it to a valueless state. You don't think you're going to do that without somebody filing a lawsuit against you. That's why we have a Supreme Court, and that's going to happen. I mean, it's just a fact of nature. You're taking something from somebody that's putting time, money, and effort into it, and you're taking that away from them. They're not going to stand for it. None of us would. Nobody at this table would stand for it.
Well, no one's going to sue on this property right now.
It means nothing. I mean, yeah, as I say, you could do it on this property because it doesn't matter what the zoning. It could be light industrial for all we care. It's never going to happen. It's just not going to happen because the public is making decisions now as to what it wants for that property. And that's what it's going to be in the end. So, all right, great meeting. We ran a little later than I thought we would, but that's okay.
Oh, my goodness.
Start thinking about it for your homework. Start thinking about the things you like. Start thinking about the people you'd like to see. And we'll get into it next month, the next meeting. It is next month.
Next month.